So we're going to talk now about this new saw we just bought. It's a Bosch. It's a very nice saw. It costs about $650 some, I think, or maybe a little more. But anyway, it's a good one. The controls on it, though, are somewhat different than the controls on our old Makita. And so I want to go over those in kind of detail here for the people that haven't used a Bosch before. So I guess we'll just start at the top. It is a slider, only it doesn't have slides. It's got this linkage back here, which operates very nice, very smoothly. And the up and down is very easy and smooth. And so that is an improvement over the rails that the other saws slid on. They didn't slide as easy and they could get gummed up and stop sliding very good. This is better. This right here is one feature that we want to talk about. This thing, if you flip it down like that, I don't know if you see that, Ben, but if you flip it down like that, now the saw will not come out. It doesn't come this way anymore. It's now just a straight miter saw, or chop saw, as some people call it. Okay, so it just chops. Okay, and if we push this down and that thing comes out of there, now it'll slide all the way out. Now, for whatever reason, they build it so that it'll also lock here and hold the saw out here. So if you're changing the blade, maybe that would be helpful to have it out here where you can reach it a little easier, I guess. So that's what that guy does. Normally, of course, we'd leave him up so that the saw will slide and go back and forth like we want it to. The mitering this way of this saw is just like the other ones. It's got a lock knob here, and then underneath, with that finger, you can lift that up, and then it turns either way. And this one saw goes to 60 degrees this way and 50 some degrees that way. So it's got a wider range than the other ones do, which is a good thing. And it's got a detent there, and it's got detents at 15, 22 and a half, 30. No, I'm sorry, not 30, 31.6. That's got to do with crown molding. There's a detent at 45, and then there's the detent at 60. So they're all there mostly for carpenters cutting rafters and hip roofs and stuff like that. So, but they're there. So the miter is straightforward like that. Okay. The bevel is the adjustment that's different on this saw. The bevel is, of course, when we're tipping the blade either this way or this way, okay? So if you're going to bevel the blade, you would, over here, you can't see this one, Ben. We'll have to get a shot of this. But there's a switch-like thing over here. It's got 3 positions. It's in the normal position. It's 45 degrees, 0 to 45 degrees left. And so it means you're going to tip it this way, to the left, okay? So when you want to do that, you have to have this in the left tipping position, and this is the lever that unlocks the beveling. Not in the back here like it was on our Makitas with the left-hand thread and all that hard-to-reach stuff. It's right here. So you lift this up, and this is now in the left tilting position, so the saw will tilt to the left. So you can see, if you stand over on this side, there's an indicator back here for the angle, and that's the only one there is. So if you're going to be precise, you might want to get one of those magnetic angle devices they use mostly on the table saw to set the angle, but they would work here too. And glom that onto the blade, and then you can tell exactly what angle you have. If you just tip it all the way over, it stops at 45 degrees built in. If you just pull it back, and it's heavy, but if you pull it back all the way, it goes back to 0. and then you would lock it back down. Now if you want to stop somewhere in between, like 30 degrees, you go here, and I set the pointer as close to 30 as I can. I'm not holding it up, incidentally. It stays there. And then lock down. And that's about 30 degrees. So that's tilting in that direction. If you want to go to the right, you have to lift this up, and then you can change this knob. And sometimes you have to take a little bit of the weight off of it to turn this knob. But if you do, it goes over and it stays in the left tilting position. Oops, this way. Why, the reason they have this extra knob is, for some reason, I don't really know why they had to build it that way, but they did. When you have it in the tilt to the right, the detent things over here work, and the detent things over here don't work. If we have it to the left tilt, then the detent things here work, and these don't work. So I'm not sure why they built it that way, but they did. So if I want to tilt this way, there's the 45. If I go back up here to the 30 mark and wiggle it a little bit, lock it, now I'm at 30. Okay. So that's this guy. Now, when I unlock it and I go back to 0, maybe you heard it click, the little knob pops back, so it's set for left beveling. Okay. So much for that. Now, down here is another pin, and this is the detent pin. If I pull this out and turn it, there's a cross pin in here, a roll pin in here, and in one rotated position where it is now, it's free to spring back in and pop into a detent. If I pull it out and turn it 90 degrees, now the roll pin keeps this pin from going in, so it doesn't catch any of the detents. But if I do that, and then I tilt this way, I should get to a detent. There it goes. It moved in. I don't know if you could see that or not, but I saw it move in. So now it's in the detent, and now if I lock it, I know I'm set right at that detent. Okay, so we take that out. Now you have to pull that out before you can move it. So you pull it out, you rotate it 90, and then the little roll pin that's in the shaft there stops it from slipping back into the detent. Get back to 0 and lock this back down. So that's the beveling. It is what it is. This extra switch is a feature. The third position on this switch is to the left, this way, and it says that it's for maximum bevel angle to 47 degrees. So you can exceed the 45 degree stop either way, left or right, by 2 degrees. So if you've cut something that's not quite 45 degrees and you're trying to match it, I guess that'll help you do it. So that's what it's for. But those are the 3 positions, and it snaps back to the straight up and down position, which is 45 degrees left. And the detent and all that. Okay, so that's how that works. Now, the first thing that you do when you're going to bevel is to move these out of the way. Okay, these are normally for straight cuts, not beveled cuts. You put these in close, and it keeps the little pieces from flying to the back when you cut them, which we talked about before. And that's what's there. If you tilt this now and bevel it, it'll let you do it, and the blade will hit these parts. On our saw that we took out of service just a few days ago that we're going to sell, that saw, somebody did that. I don't know, it was there for years and it never happened before, but somebody did it recently. They tilted it to the left, and there was a saw cut in this part about a ½ an inch long, and then there was a break right here. So what had happened apparently was they had some wood there, they tilted it They didn't check. They came down. It started cutting this, and when it hit the wood apparently wasn't up against the fence either, because then it snapped it into that, and it actually broke this piece right here. It didn't break it apart, but it broke it so it was dislodged back. Okay, so anyway, you have to move these out of the way. There's a little lock knob on each side, one back there, goes all the way out. Okay, and then you can lock it out there so it stays out there. Now, while I'm looking at these, you can see they got gradations on both sides here with no numbers because they're movable. So the numbers would be kind of meaningless. But if you're going to cut something over and over and don't have too many, you don't have to put a stop here anymore. You can just remember which mark it is. Of course, people are going to write on this. I know they are. They're going to make a mark there and say, that's my mark. Anyway, there you can just use these marks to cut the same length pieces. On this saw, they talk about a no-hand zone, and they got a picture here of a hand with a do not sign across it, and they don't want your hand any closer to the blade than this. Not over here holding the wood. Back here. So we have the hold down. The hold down goes in a hole. There's a hole down there in the back, and now it swings around. And of course, we've had these on all the chop saws all along, and you just put your wood in there first, and then you can adjust this to hold it down. And please use them. That one, and then over here goes on the other side as well. Okay, and there's only one. Okay. So those are some of the features. There's a feature here we're not going to be able to take advantage of. If you don't have a nice fence built like we do here, they have an extension here. You just move this thing would come out. But in case you're wondering what they're for, that's what they're for. We're just going to leave them locked in place here, because we have our blocks to help us hold up things. Okay. So on this side of the saw, we have a few things to look at here. This stuff here is, so when you pull the saw down, you see this goes in the hole, and the saw goes all the way down and cuts normally. Okay. It has a feature, and most of the chop saws do, is you can cut grooves with this. So if you wanted to have the blade come down just this far, so it's only going to cut that deep into your wood, and you want to use the slider mechanism and go back and forth, you can cut a groove. Now you have to cut one blade width, shift the wood a little bit, cut it again, shift and cut to get any width to your groove. The book from the saw manufacturer says the first choice for cutting grooves, as they call them in wood, dados, is a table saw with a dado blade in it, not this. This is not as precise. These chop saws, as I've told you before, are not real precise. They're not terrible, but they're not real precise. Dados need to be good. They need to be real precise. So you really don't want to cut them on here. And it takes forever anyways doing it this way. And as an aside, the router table with the right size bit in it is my choice for dados, if I can manage the wood on the router table. So for all of the small and medium stuff, I rig up some fences and things and clamps, and I end up doing it on a router table, and I get excellent results. The dado on this table saw takes extra time to set up. It's the only way to do big pieces if you don't want to do them by hand. I did some today by hand because I didn't want to set up the table saw. I clamped the boards onto the bench, and I clamped a straight edge in the right position, and I used the hand router, and I did it in half the time it would have taken me to do the table saw. But that's all on the side. Here, if you want to cut grooves, what you do is you pull this little black part over, and now that can't go through there. So you can use this to change the height that the blade stops at. See, I lowered it or I raised it, okay? Push that in, it goes back in and everything is fine. Okay. The lock to hold the saw down is this red button here. So if you're changing the blade and you want it down, which I wouldn't, and the book says do it up, but if you ever want to lock the blade down for some reason, this is the button. It just push and pulls in and out. Okay. All right. This button here is the blade lock. If you're going to change the blade, you got to hold the blade still. So you put your pressure on it and you rotate the blade till it finds the hole, and then it pops in, and now the blade is locked. However, it springs right out. It's spring loaded. It doesn't stay in. So you have to hold this in with one hand and use the wrench on the nut with your other hand to change the blade. So spring loaded, but that's the blade lock. And up here is the switch. This switch is a little different. They all are apparently. This one, this big red part, slides to the left or to the right. And it springs back to the center position. And when it's in the center position, it won't run. Okay? It has to be over to this side or over to this side. And then when I squeeze the other part under here, the saw will come on. So the idea is that you push it with your thumb. I like to push it this way with your thumb, and then squeeze the handle, and the saw will come on. Okay? Except we don't have it energized right now, so it doesn't come on. So that would be the motion, and that would be the action. Okay? Now, I guess maybe, I don't know, does a left-handed person, I never saw a left-handed person using this saw. I'll bet they still switch with their right hand. Well, anyway, it'll work either way, right or left, and then squeeze that. That's how the switch works, and it springs back. This is the knob I was talking about before, the bevel positions switch, so to speak. Normally up and down, spring loaded to go to this position at 0 to 45 degree left bevel. If you want to bevel to the right, you have to turn this knob this way till it gets to that position. And so you turn it over like that, you lift the lock, and now I can go to the right. And the detents will work, okay? Now watch that button when I bring this back up, boing. That's the default position. If you want to use that extra 2 degrees on one side or the other, you have to turn this lock this way. And now I can go past the 45 degree stop and get to 47 degrees one way or the other. And that's the default position. This is the lock, remember. When you get where you want to be, you push this down to keep it there on the bevel. This is that detent pin I was talking about before. I don't know if you get enough detail to see that or not, but there's the roll pin through the shaft there. When I put it in this position with the roll pin sticking up and down, it can slide in and hits the detent plate inside. If I pull it out and rotate it so that the roll pin is horizontal, there's stops here, and it won't let this pin go all the way into the detent, so it stays out. And that's the normal position. If it's in, and it's in a detent, you won't be able to move this bevel. So if you're having trouble moving the bevel, this is the thing to check and see, oh, maybe this is in there in the detent yet. Okay, so that you keep that out. That's the normal position, is with the pin horizontal, so it's not engaging any detents. Okay. Right now our saw is in real nice shape. This will get damaged eventually, and hopefully though, with the new design here, they didn't give us users a way to lower the blade too far and saw up the bottom of our saw like we always used to do, with our old saws. So that's a bit of an improvement. The instructions for beveling, incidentally, are right here in graphic form. So that new feature, if you have some trouble remembering exactly how to do it, it's right here for you. Okay. So that's our new saw, and I didn't bring it all the way back to 0 there, and then I locked it. Now it's good. and this is locked. That's our new Bosch saw. It's I've used it, and it's very it handles very nicely. It's very easy to use.